you.
Well, it'll be more than okay because it's a great place too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
How's it going?
Good evening, and welcome to West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting for this evening, Tuesday, March 9th at 7 p.m. And I'm going to ask Cammie to read the roll.
Mrs. Blanks,
Here.
Dr. Greenberg. Here. Mr. Levine,
Here.
Mr. Paul-Uke,
Here.
Ms. Poland,
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson,
Here.
Mr. Zdanowitz,
Here.
Student Representative Gus Bacon,
Here.
and Megan Striff-Cave.
Here.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Megan to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And keeping with the agenda, tonight we do have student participation. I'm sorry, there's no revision to our to the agenda order. And the next item on the agenda is student participation. And we welcome this evening Wolcott Way from Wolcott School.
Do you want to introduce?
For the parents or other relatives who have cameras and would like some photos, please feel free to come up to the board table. You can stand behind us or whatever is suitable and snap away.
I'm going to invite Scott Dunn, Wolcott's principal, to come up and talk a little bit about the Wolcott Way.
Good evening. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, members of the Board of Education, and very glad to represent Wolcott here tonight, and was excited about the invitation earlier this year to have our students be showcased. And while we had several ideas to share with you, we really decided quickly on the Wolcott Way. And so last Thursday night was our kindergarten orientation night for our incoming kindergarten friends next year. And one of my opening remarks was that every principal boasts that their school is unique and special, and indeed that's true, especially I think in a town like West Hartford. We have much of which to be proud. But when I spoke about Wolcott, I spoke about two particular parts that I think make Wolcott very special and unique. One is that our student population really is not only representative of the town of West Hartford, but also society at large. And it's wonderful for students to have those opportunities to get to know different cultures and different perspectives. And also, we have a program that is put together by our Safe School Climate Team, which is made up of several members of our school community here, parents included. And you're going to see pieces tonight of what that program is that really emanates from the Safe School Climate. And also it really promotes a safe and positive and respectful learning environment. And hopefully you're getting a taste of that tonight. And the person who's going to kick us off with that is our school psychologist, Erica Newfang.
Hi. So, Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, or PBIS, is a multi-tiered system of support that promotes the academic, social, emotional, and behavioral competence for all students. So, our students here today are going to highlight some of our Tier 1 or primary prevention efforts that are available in all classrooms and in all settings throughout the school. So here we have Khalees, who is a new student at Wolcott School, and Catherine, who is a very exuberant young lady, is going to be teaching Khalees about the Wolcott Way.
Welcome to Wolcott School! Well, I heard Wolcott School is the best out of all the other elementary schools. It sure is. Why? Because we have the Wolcott Way. What's the Wolcott Way? Well, you have to be respectful, responsible, and ready to learn. Okay. I think I get it. Oh, no, you don't, because we also practice character choices throughout the year. What are those? There's kindness, cooperation, positive attitude, fairness, self-control, perseverance, and friendship. Okay. I guess I get it. But wait, there's more.
Catherine, how do we learn about those?
At our town meetings. Sometimes we introduce them with a song. Friendship is better than
Doritos!
friendship is better than
Dirt!
friendship is better than
Just a Bieber baby!
We also learn about it through skits. How do I make a friend? Use kind words. Okay. And in our classrooms, we learn about it through a book.
This kind of stuff made King Duncan subject furious.
So at Wolcott School, we have a One School, One Book initiative. It directly links literacy to our efforts with PBIS. Our school has chosen 7 character traits, or character choices, which we just heard about, that we learn, practice, and we recognize throughout the school year. We use it as a mentor text to guide students through any behavioral challenges throughout the year. And it's really our goal that we'll have all students at the same time learning and practicing and being recognized for these character choices.
The end.
And that is how we learn about character choices here at Wolcott School. Okay, I'm ready. But wait, there's more. If a student is making a good choice and a teacher sees it, then they get awarded with a Buffy's Best.
Congratulations.
what do I do with this? You hang it on the Buffy's best wall! Go on, don't put it on the wall. And if your Buffy's best lands on a magnifying glass, then you and your class will get a special prize. In fact, we have Buffy's bests for all of our Board of Ed members for being so supportive to Wolcott School. Go.
Thank you.
So, Khalees, do you think you're ready to take on Wolcott School?
Are you ready? Yes, Mrs. Newfane, I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to conclude that we have just seen a portion of what some of our Tier 1 implementation looks like. And what you've seen is something that all students experience and all staff members implement. A few other things that we do that are really integral to our Tier 1 efforts are we teach and reteach and practice the behavioral expectations in every environment throughout the school year. We have classroom management systems where the behavioral expectations are taught, they're reinforced when the expectations are met, and we have a system for creating reflective moments for our students. And we also have bully prevention lessons and second step lessons that we teach with Fidelity. So in West Hartford, our mission is to clear paths so all students can get what they need, and we feel that this framework really directly aligns with West Hartford's mission of clearing paths and allowing our students to be successful.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to thank Mr. Matt Dick's fifth grade classroom, some of the friends who are here today who put this skit together. I'm wondering if all of our fifth grade friends could just tell our Board of Ed friends what your first and last names are.
Vincent Desi, Owen Holm, Sophia Tenasio-Villa,
You're so very.
Grace Minahan, Catherine Burtness, Elise Davis, Victoria Clark,
Jonathan Rivera.
All these friends worked with Mr. Dix, who is unfortunately wants to be here but is at another district event tonight in town. But want to thank them for giving, hopefully, you a little bit of slice of what Wolcott life is like with the Wolcott Way. So thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. That was absolutely awesome, and what a great presentation. Next up on the agenda is public communications, and when I last looked at the sheet, there wasn't anyone who had signed up. Did I forget anybody in the audience who signed up and I overlooked them? Okay. We will move into unfinished business. The first piece of unfinished business is proposed calendars for the 2020-2021 school year. And it is the second reading, and the recommendation is that the Board of Education review as a second and final reading the proposed calendars for 2020-2021 school year. I believe.
Sure, yeah. There's three options in front of you that we've talked about, and as we said last time, there can be amendments, motions voted on with any one of these calendars. You vote to approve, disapprove them, because they're kind of a mix. The first calendar in front of you is the classic regionally agreed to historical CREC calendar, where we start on the 26th of August, and April vacation falls during the second full week of April. The second calendar in front of you is the one where we actually bump back the first day of school till September 2nd, which makes it the Wednesday before Labor Day weekend, and April vacation is the same as typical. And then the third option in front of you has Labor Day bump back, not Labor Day, we don't get to move that. The first day of school moved back to the second, and April vacation bumped back a week, so that it's actually the first full week of April, but it captures that Good Friday holiday and makes for an extended April break that way. So, in fairness, I don't know if the board got a lot of feedback from this. I didn't get a lot of feedback. I actually got a couple comments. There was one about teacher concern about their children being off different times than theirs, and another concern about bumping back from a high school AP teacher, that bumping back a week is one less week of prep time before the advanced placement exams. So that's outside thoughts I went to, and I don't know if you got other ones, but that's that for you to discuss.
Okay, so
Yeah.
hold on a second, because I kind of jumped the gun. What I should have done was ask for a motion.
But it's not, what do we do a motion
So-
on one, and then if we don't like it, vote it down, and then do motion two? Or
Right,
do we?
so, okay, so here's what we can do, because we need to do a motion and get a second and then have discussion. So we can do that for, we can go through it in terms of proposed calendar number 1, and then we can do proposed calendar number 2, and then we can do proposed calendar number 3.
I don't think we need a motion for all three.
No, you
Just
can motion to discuss all
discuss
three.
it.
Right. So that was what I was
Yep.
asking for, a motion and then a second, and then we can have a discussion on all 3 of the calendars.
So moved.
Second.
Now we can have the discussion, and Mark, you had your hand up.
Tom, just quickly, what the AP, what was the concern about the April vacation in the third iteration?
It wasn't April vacation so much as it's that AP exams basically take place from May 3rd to May 21st, depending in that time frame, those 2 weeks of May, really. And so if you take a week out and start a week later, that's 1 week less of classroom space. Now, the truth is that depending on where the calendar falls, there's never X number of days that we have before advanced placement exams. The reason AP exams are as early as they are in May is because of the variances of the calendars throughout the country. There are parts of the country that are back to school. August 1st is their day back, but so they're out by May 15th, so the advanced placement exams take place then.
In fact, this private schools were off last week
Yeah. I mean, it's just.
in West Hartford.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying it as that was an issue that somebody raised. It's something that comes up. Last year we had 7 snow days. 5 of them came in March. I think it was 5 in March. And that was very unusual, and it did, put a crunch during that April time period, certainly. So it's just one of those things that's a thought somebody had that I wanted to pass on.
Anybody else?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we all got a letter from a concerned teacher about what Tom said about if teachers have kids in this district and teach in another district, how that could negatively impact them. And I was wondering if any of you, I didn't hear from anyone else, but that person's letter has been weighing on me a lot since it came in. I don't know about the rest of you. And so I was just curious if anyone else on the board heard from anybody else, and just curious what people thought about that.
Same letter I received. The one that I think we all received is the only input I've received. But, this goes far beyond our teachers. It goes, the working parents, too, have the same responsibilities with their children as teachers do as well. One person might have to take off if they have both working parents. So it just doesn't affect teachers, and I don't think we should ever look at that because one district is off and one isn't. You have to look at the entire population of people, and so that's having moved April vacation is just a matter of logistics, whether you're a teacher, mailman, whatever job that you may be. It's a matter of having to work your schedule. And as long as you know it in advance to 2021, those things can be made. So, you know, typically when, in the past, when we've had calendars, I think we've had a lot more input from the town, and this was surprisingly minimal, one email. So I was surprised that no one really thought of this as something to get in touch with us, because in the past, the president was set that we did receive quite a few emails on different options that we proposed. So I was surprised that we didn't get any on this one. So that might tell you something. I don't obviously want to speak for the lack of emails we had, but it just might demonstrate the willingness of the flexibility of our West Hartford residents.
So two things. I think this has been a really interesting exercise to consider when to start, when to have April vacation. But I too was surprised that we really didn't receive a lot of feedback from people in the community on this. One other issue that hasn't really been brought up yet is if we're looking at the April vacation week, the idea of calendar 3, where we push April vacation up to coincide with Good Friday. The concern I have with that is that weekend, the Sunday the 4th, will be Easter Sunday. And I know a lot of high school students go on trips during April vacation. And so if we move April vacation up to start basically on Good Friday and then continue for the week, I just think that some high school students will not be able to celebrate Easter with their families. When if we leave April vacation where it is in calendars 1 and 2, then they would still be able to have the holiday with their families and also go on a school trip. So for food for thought. And I'd love to hear what Megan and Gus have to say about any of this, if you have any thoughts. But I don't want to put you on the spot.
That is a very good thing to think about, certainly with those trips. It has happened before. I've taken a trip where it was during the Easter break. It hasn't precluded it because of where Easter sometimes, if it falls that week later, it has happened that's fallen there, but it's absolutely something to consider. I'm glad you brought it up.
I don't have it either way, but I just a counter, and I agree with what you said, but just a counter is that maybe it's the opportunity to provide people to travel for Easter and spend it with family that they couldn't spend, on other holidays. And I'm not arguing either way. I like your argument. I just wanted to give the counterbalance to that they would be able to spend time with their families either. And just to give fair recognition, I'd like to hear Gus too.
I think I'm more in favor of the first one, just because taking AP classes, I know that it already feels stressful as it is, just having time to fit in everything, because our teachers point out a lot that, we're kind of cramming in curriculum that we don't always really have enough time to go through everything. And like last year, I took AP US History, and we didn't get through the full curriculum by the time of the exam. So like I had to study things on my own that we didn't get to, like 1990s of 2001. Like I had to study by myself. And I kind of worry about, it seems like 1 week, but that 1 week probably could have been the week that I could have studied, that period of time. It really does move that fast, and there's so much content. So I'd be more in favor of one that started earlier, just to make sure there's enough time for all AP content.
So you want to, I'm just confused. I want to make sure I get your point. You want April vacation earlier, or
No, not about April vacation. It's about the starting school date. I want it. I want the starting date for school to be earlier.
I got what you're saying. So it has nothing to do with the April vacation.
No, the April break doesn't have to do with it.
Thank
you.
Actually, this is something I'd like to bring up. So, usually we have April break and then we go right into AP exams, and that's a bit of a pain. I think having April break earlier so that there isn't like you come back from break and then hop into AP exams, I think avoiding that could be helpful for people.
I find myself surprised. For the last several years, we felt constricted by having to conform with the correct calendar. Now that we have a choice, I feel I want to conform with the correct calendar. It's just funny. I have heard, to Mark's point, there are groups other than teachers, but teachers are the one where it's just so easy to see that teachers who live in West Hartford but teach in a neighboring school district, another district somewhere, they already, have issues when there's a snow day, when one district is on and the other one's off, and they make that work. But if we stick with the correct calendar, number one, I feel that would be in the best interest, and especially because there hasn't been an outcry one way or the other, I think that'd be a good way to go.
I was just going to, Gus, could you clarify? So were you saying that you would actually like the option where the April vacation would get smushed together in that year, or is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I think when you look at AP exams, that's probably the best way to go. But you make a good point though with people going away right before Easter. So I don't know. I just think it's something to consider because, I mean, no one's going to study for AP exams when they're away for spring break. So it's pretty hard to, because I think last year some of my exams were like, I got back from April break, had a week, and then AP exams the next week. I might be remembering that wrong, but that was either last year or sophomore year, and it was a bit of a pain.
Sorry, I totally hear you. I have to say I think on the same page as Dave, but just to clarify, this particular year, even with the later schedule, you'd still have 2 weeks, right? Just because of the way the calendar falls. In general, I think I understand totally, but right, because you'd come back the 19th of April, and it wouldn't happen till early May. So I think it's true. I have no stake in this either way, but since nobody else seems to have any stake in this either way, except teachers who have a particular week that they're off, and anybody else has whatever week they're off, I am inclined to say, if everybody else is doing it, why can't we? Just in terms of consistency with people and other relatives or whatever in other school districts. I understand also about the earlier start times. I mean, sorry, the earlier start date, and earlier start times. And this is a terrible thing to say as a college professor, but I'm a little bit unhappy about driving our calendar quite so much because of AP. I think it's already ridiculous that they have the exam so early that we're cramming curriculum, and I'm very uneasy about pushing our calendar for pre-K through 12 on the basis of some other thing. So I have to say, I would rather give parents that last week in August than not. But again, I'm easy. I don't really care, but it seems to me that that's what I would go for.
Just one thing about the start date. I think starting, like the first option, starting earlier, obviously means we get out earlier. And I think a lot of things I've been hearing from my friends is that we're all getting like summer jobs and stuff. And I mean, this is obviously kind of a small thing, but I think a lot of people think it's nice to have kind of like a week before all camps and everything start. Even now, like job training, people are wondering when graduation is going to be so that they have enough days for kind of the job training and camp trainings that they're doing before they start a summer job. And I think at least general consensus among kind of my friends is that starting earlier and ending earlier is kind of easy. So you have maybe like kind of that week before everyone kind of gets into work and stuff like that. So that's just, I mean, another one of the perks for option one.
That's actually, it's both this topic and another topic with a bill brought up in front of the state that we've seen that would 180 days before the last day of school, you could name your graduation date. So even if there were snow days, seniors could graduate on that day. And part of that, actually, the Connecticut tourism industry has come out in favor of that. But that's also something I've heard a lot from kids with orientations at colleges, where they're ending up pushing back into July and going to orientation later than some other areas of the country, which can actually affect their course selection. So that's something that's been brought up too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about working parents, and that last week of August, there are not usually any camps available. And, you know, thinking back to when your kids are younger and you're trying to figure out what to do with them for that last, sometimes 10 days, even 2 weeks of August before school gets started, it's challenging. On the other hand, all we're doing is pushing it to the other end of the calendar, because camps aren't really going to get started until the third week of June, because they don't want to schedule themselves too close to the end of school in case of snow days. So I guess I'm saying it's hard on working parents anyway. But at this point, because we haven't had a huge outcry to move the start date to September, I am too inclined to leave it at August 26th.
So as far as the camps go, remember, they adhere to our calendar. They work around our calendar. So no matter where we get out of school, the camps are going to start when we get out of school. So that doesn't really change. And remember, you guys are saying, let's stay with CREC. Remember, it is now our decision where I think it belongs, and that you all may want to not change it, but you have no idea what other Board of Eds are going to do. So these Simsbury, Avons, Farmingtons are sitting in a room similar to this, discussing it and saying, hey, I want to start in September, and then it's all for naught, because any work that you think that you wanted to save here and not change, now that it's where it belongs in the decision makers, those changes are potentially going to happen, and then it's going to be chaos anyway, if that's what you're trying to avoid. I don't believe in the chaos, but it is law now, so, or lack of law, that we do this. And as far as no camps being available in August, you know, as a parent with 3 kids in sports, actually August is kind of a busy time for sports, and a lot less time for vacation. If you look at it, if you're a sports family, you really only have the first week of August and July potentially for vacations, because your next 3 weeks of August starts football, starts cross country, things like that. So those sports have already started. And that late start time, you know, again, you know, we're not looking at getting out we're not getting out much later. And I'm not really too concerned about the April vacation, where it lands, but I guess my point is that a later start, you know, Dave always talks about this air conditioning piece, and wants it to be brought up 5 years from now when there's a new board and things like that. And okay, I get it. But, you know, the reason we have daylight savings time is to save energy. And it was for lights, so that your lights weren't on in your house. A lot of people don't know that. But so this potentially actually could be one of those times where in late August, you're not in school when it's hot, and you start in September. The only reason I brought up the April vacation, because Easter, and it does move, happened to fall on Friday, April 2nd, which would be a nice transition into a vacation. So I thought it was kind of a seamless instead of a disjointed. So I'm really, I like the third calendar. And again, back to AP, I don't want to go and, there's only really 4-day difference. You're starting 4 days difference. So how does it affect AP? I'm not really sure, other than if you had your April vacation the second week, you would actually have that many more days to study for it. You would actually have a 3, if not 4 weeks with continuity in a row of studying. So it wouldn't be first week of April, AP stuff, a break, AP exams. It would be a week off, AP exams. So that continuity, in my mind, from when I was back in the day in school, that would be more helpful than a break and potentially having to study a lot more over vacation. So I think the impacts of other towns making changes, we often talk, this board likes to lead, and sometimes I say the best leader is to follow, and that is often the case, but sometimes the best is to lead. And when you're the 10th or 9th largest, there are times to lead, there's time to follow. And I think this particular time is, one to lead on. Getting back to a calendar that is, I hate to say, old school. Back in the day when this was, for 40 years, this is how a calendar was set. And then all of a sudden we started changing it. And that's why we got a lot of people coming to these meetings and a lot of emails, because things were changing. Legislation was putting their finger on it. We were changing it back and forth often, and I don't think it's something that we should monkey with a lot. I think, there's some fine tuning, but I think if we set a calendar, it's something that we should stick with. And if we find that we set this calendar and then other towns around us adhere to, say, our third or second calendar, then we change again. And we change because we're following and not leading. So just more food for thought.
All right. Well, since I'm here to represent the students, I think the thing that students think most about when they hear, school calendar is that they want February break back. I'm not seeing that in any of these options, but I think that's something to consider. Also, the day after the Super Bowl it'd be really cool for that.
I'm in.
That's like the only thing I've ever heard. It's like, Megan, get the day after the Super Bowl.
Just saying.
I'm like, thanks for thinking I have that.
I'm not seeing that in here, but all right.
So, Tom, can you talk a little bit about February vacation? And like why we got rid of it and...
Sure. A large survey was taken with a lot of responses. I think up until the late school start time, it was probably the largest survey that we had done. And again, the three groups were relatively split. But the preponderance of people, I know that the teachers were big fans of February vacation. It was coming at a time we had had a huge run of snow for like 2 years in a row. And so that year we were in the 25th, 26th, 27th of June. And so there was certainly a reaction to that run of many, many snow days. A couple years in a row, we had the October snowstorm. Then the following year, we were having to shovel off our roofs of the schools because of so much heavy snow. So I think it was thought that shortens the school year to not have February vacation. I think that I do believe the heat was brought up at that point without the air conditioning being in schools. And I also think there was a feeling that you've only been back in school for 6 weeks, and then boom, you have February vacation. So at that point, it was moved to kind of the 4-day break with the weekend and then the Monday and Tuesday. The statement was made at that point in time, that they were going to go forward and not go back and forth, because there was 1 year where there wasn't a February vacation, then it came back the following year, and parents basically felt like, we just want to know what there's going to be. So that's kind of a historical context.
I'm about to send everybody back into the ping pong table, but what if we did do the earlier start time and took 3 of those days and put them in February 17th to 19th? Then we would have a February vacation and still not lose all the extra days of February.
Yeah, do you mean adjusting the
start-
start on a Wednesday, or do you just mean?
No, I mean, because the debate that we were having was start on Wednesday, the 26th, or start on the 2nd,
Yep.
right? So if we started on the 26th, then we could take 3 of those savings days and put them into February if people wanted their
If you
February
wanted to,
back.
you could, yes.
I truly have no clear agenda here about what I want or don't want. But anyway, that struck me as a solution, although I have to say I'm totally persuaded by your heat argument, Mark, to leave it later.
So I'm going to jump in here. If we were to do that, and we have some snow days in there, what would that look like? Tom?
If you added 3, so on calendar 3, right? If you added 3 days, you're starting at the 21st as graduation date.
No, I'm saying start calendar 1.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, my fault. Okay, so if you go to calendar 1, then you're arguing for the 11th would be the scheduled last day of school. So, yeah, that would be another option. Again, I would just say that you'd be committing at this point, I think, to having that be the case. Again, I really honestly have no dog in this fight. When you tell me to be here, I'll be here. I do think that we batted around a little bit 2 weeks ago when we talked about February break. It wasn't an option put in. I'm not sure if you've had time for feedback. With that being said, we're 2 years ahead of time. So we do this on purpose. But if there were an outcry, you can raise this issue again this year or the beginning of next year if you wanted and say, we made a mistake, we want to change the calendar. That's completely up to you.
Because to Mark's point, if we were to go with the proposed calendar number 3, where we would start later, and then we have the April vacation. If we were to get like a snowstorm like we did, I want to say a couple years back, how far out in terms of snow days would that put us? Because right now for calendar 3, the last day of school would be the 15th, correct?
Yeah, so if you look at kind of the median, like this year we're at 2, knock on wood that's all. Other years we've been at 5 and then 7. I think we had a high of 9. And so if you look at that would put you into the worst case scenario, puts you into the last week. But that was the extreme case with Snowmageddon and everything else. And yeah.
Yeah, all I want to ask was there any, about the February break thing, I wasn't really paying attention to it, I guess, at the time, but was there any concerns about it being hard for working parents to find camps and stuff for break, or that being a cost? Was that any, a big issue raised, or was that not really important?
I don't remember that being an issue at all, the cost. It was, one of the camps was the skiers that wanted it off. There was another camp that just didn't want it, and there was a reason too. Wasn't there something about a February break, and I may be completely wrong, and you could tell me, but because of flu season, wasn't it a good idea to have them out of school?
I feel I remember that too.
No, that's absolutely one of the arguments for the February break. It's just, that's an argument that I hear, I make, I believe it, but I have no evidence to back it up.
Right,
I mean, everybody talks about it, and I believe it too, that is the time when you have flu outbreaks typically, and there's a week in between when kids aren't in school. Now, that's also, right now, there's 4 days where there's kids not in school, which kind of can bat it down too. But it's certainly something talked about, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I just don't make the claims. I don't know empirically that that's true.
So, but Cheryl said she wanted to play ping pong. That's a big ping pong ball. I think, is offering up February vacation again. I don't disagree with it. I don't have it either way. I particularly always liked February vacation, but that was just me. I've got to vote on the masses. I think if we were entertaining that, and you kind of alluded, I think, Tom, a little bit, that not necessarily do we need a second reading, probably, but a third reading, and to maybe get input, because that is a big change. That is going back. But again, I go back to, this is the reason why I think it belongs here in this room to make these changes. It didn't belong in the state, and I argued when it went that way. These are all good arguments. None is better than the other, and none's worse than the other. It's that this is where it belongs. This is where we make that decision. And, you know, just for instance, you know, you say one because we should be like everybody else. But there are other schools. I know Simsbury has the Friday off before February vacation, or a half day and or off. Professional day. So those particular teachers are in school if they teach for West Hartford, you know what I mean? So there are already those instances that exist. And by removing the law, I just want to reiterate that those will continue to as well. So we may find ourselves next year looking at this and saying, we got to change because everyone else did. But February vacation, if we talk about that, and that's something that we want to move forward, I think that we delay this and not only do a second reading, but maybe a third, so that we can get more public weigh-in.
I like that idea. I think we should probably reduce some of the options, so we're not looking at, 6 or 7 different options at the next reading of the calendar. And so would it be appropriate to make a motion to do that, or?
So we have.
Oh, we have a motion on the table already to discuss.
So we can, I believe we can amend. Could we amend the motion on the table to add?
Yeah, you can amend and table. These aren't necessarily in the same way of voting blocks as anything else. So you're really in control by discussion as to what comes forward. So I don't think you have to vote on each one. You can, certainly, as that being the mechanism of deciding. But yeah, you can move to eliminate one of the calendars, move to eliminate 2 of the calendars, and then you can move to table it. And actually this would come up not the night of budget adoption, because historically that's the only thing on it. Then the following week, the following board meeting in April, this would come back to the table then.
Oops. I know I suggested it, and I only suggested it because Gus said they wanted to consider it, and I thought there was a way to do it. But before we that's right, I forgot about the Super Bowl. But
we're going to order up a snow day for that day.
But before we decide to table it for a week, I was the only one who suggested it, so I don't even know that there's support around the table to consider it. So I would like to get that sense before we wait another time to do it.
Well,
Who's that? Go ahead, Rob.
Is it? Am I on now? All right. Just to kind of throw a little different perspective or wrench in it, I'm a Midwestern boy, and when I moved here, I thought you were all kind of crazy taking breaks in February and April, because we grew up taking our breaks in March, which is actually when spring break happens, because it's spring. So, especially being a realtor by trade, when I have clients that move in from out of state, I get those same looks like, you take breaks in February and April, and you're just like, so I mean, I guess it's all what the locals are used to. And now that I've been here 19 years, I'm kind of like, yeah, I kind of get it. And we're a skiing family. So there's a lot of great arguments going around the table. I don't know that there's any better choice than anything else. I think it's feedback, right? So I kind of feel like the comments earlier about like, well, we didn't get much feedback, so maybe nobody cares. I don't know. Maybe this one just flew under the radar. Like, I think I've been on this board long enough to learn that just because we don't hear from people doesn't mean that people don't care. So I caution that. I think, it's the time of year where people are really busy, and I don't think our calendar got a lot of press. So I think it's just people are unaware. The only thing I think I feel very strongly about is the Super Bowl day off. So good job, Gus. Let's do that.
I got to echo what Rob says, and Cheryl, this may be a good opportunity to get that feedback. Do a little extra push, maybe ask that a post be put in the Facebook group, for example. I don't recall reading anything, but I haven't been on there like I used to. Yeah, okay. But yeah, it might be a good option here, and because we do have a couple of years here to see what's going on, this might be a great option.
And I think, I don't know who mentioned it, but maybe narrowing it down. I actually think these are three really decent proposals, and if we're going to do a fourth, people are smart, they'll get it, right? And if we present it correctly, and not just like this, right? Because some people don't like seeing this, but if we said, calendar one, our current calendar that we've been, calendar two, late start, and so we make it easy for them, so that they could read one sentence and not have to decipher what this calendar looks like and what parentheses and a circle means. So I think if we're so inclined to add a fourth one with maybe a February vacation, because I think they're all three very viable calendars, and I think that they make sense each on their own. So I think if we did, and it's up to the board, obviously, if we did add a fourth one with a February vacation, I think we offer four options. I don't know if we need to narrow it down, but, one is no change really, right? Two is a late start with no change in April. Three is late start with a change in April. And knowing that Easter changes all the time, that may not always work out. So we may not always have the Friday and another week off. In fact, it changes all the time. So this just is an anomaly this particular year that it works out that way. So adding a fourth one with February vacation, putting it out there in the public, getting their opinion back to us, I think makes sense.
Just one suggestion about putting out to the public. I understand posting something. Please email us on Facebook. I would not use a Facebook poll. I wouldn't use comments or respond. Call me a student of history. I don't trust Facebook. And sometimes it's the same voices multiple times, and it seems like, oh, this is a groundswell, but it's not really. So we could even do a doodle poll or something like that what's that?
Survey Monkey.
Survey Monkey. We could do a variety of things that we could talk about how to get it out there. The only issue with the four calendars, you're right. But if you were doing a survey, it's a question of, do you want to do a survey or do you want to say, hey, give us feedback on this and please email us your feedback. Survey's a little bit different in terms of, with this many choices, that's a more difficult survey to do. So
So to your point, right, Tom, to your point, so I guess we can do change these calendars from visual to verbal. Say, no change to current calendar, start in August, option. Second change is start in September, option. Third would be, so it could be a verbal, you don't have to.
Well, I'll be honest, I think that because so many of them because you're getting into first option, but option 5 could be options 1 and 3 together. So, you know what I mean? I think that you have to post these. I think that the worry about this is headlines. And I mean that only in terms of, I don't want people thinking this is next year, and we can assert that in newsletters and everything else, make sure people are aware that this is for 2 years from now. So we can talk about how you want this out there. We can certainly do a Survey Monkey. We could do it through newsletters, or we could just say, please let the board know how you want to go about that.
Yeah, Tom, thinking about it, I would like to retract my Facebook comment and say that gets right to the affected parties.
Two sort of separate things on the same point. The first is to take Mark's point. It's actually like 6 choices, but really there are 3 separate choices. 1, do we want to start the 26th or the whatever it is, second? 2, do we want a February vacation that's 2 days or 5 days? 3, do we want April vacation to start after the Good Friday or the week after? Some of them will depend on each other, but we could think about it as voting one at a time, so that if we vote, so we can present it as 3 different options. We can show all 6 versions if we wanted to. But if we present it that way, those are discrete choices. So it just might make things easier. The second thing I was going to say is that, again, I don't care. But I would say rather than a poll, I would rather just ask, put it in newsletters, say it to the camera, ask people to write if they're interested. Because if they're not interested, if they don't care, then we don't need to worry about it. Because they're easy, whatever happens. The people who care will write to us. And that's who I want to hear from, because if most people are fine, whatever it is, then we can do the one that we want.
So right now, we have the 3 calendars on the board table right now. And it sounds like we want to add a 4th one with the February vacation as an option, correct? Yeah. And then we can ask for feedback. And then that way we don't have to figure out whether we want to do a doodle poll or a survey or what have you. We can receive the feedback that comes into the board. And then from there, we can make the decision whether it's one of these 3 and then include option 4 for the February break. So right now we have the motion on the table for 1 through 3. And then could we amend the motion to then add number 4 with the February option as a winter break or February break?
Just to be clear, unless we decide in advance, there'd have to be 5, because of moving the April vacation is a separate question. I mean, I would argue if we're going to do February, we should have later April just to give a little more space in between them. But if that's true, then there would only be 4.
If we do, I didn't think of it, but yes. So if this particular year, if we say we decided that we want a February vacation, I think it would make sense to do the April the 12th, the week of the 12th, and back to that original. I think that makes sense.
Just to clarify, you'd also, if you were adding February back, start on the 26th of August, not September 2nd, correct?
Right. So how many calendars do we now have? Okay.
So the 4th calendar would start on August 26th, would include a full week off in February, and would keep April break as the 2nd full week of April, the week of April 12th.
June 18th would be the last day.
And no, June 11th would be the last day of school. Pre-snow day. Yeah, June 11th would be the last day.
So does that sound doable and accurate? So do we want to call to the vote? I got it.
So we're voting to postpone it, to plead to the audience to let us know if you have strong feelings one way or the other, explain it, and vote on the 4 next time. Not next time. I mean, the next time it comes up.
Yeah. So I make a motion that we add an additional calendar with February vacation, and that we put it out for the population to give us feedback on the 4 calendars, and I say that we go to a 3rd reading, maybe a month from now. I don't know the date, but at least a month from now. And we could talk about that date, but that would be the motion. April 16th.
That would be to amend them.
Second.
Call the vote. All in.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That was a very healthy discussion on the school calendars. So moving to new business, which is ratification of the West Hartford Federation of Educational Professionals. Recommendation that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between West Hartford Federation of Educational Paraprofessionals and the Board of Education for the period of July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2022. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion.
Hello, everyone. Before you for approval is a ratified agreement between our paraeducators and the Board of Education. As you know, our 200 paraeducators play a very important role in each of our schools, supporting our teachers and assisting in the student learning process. Of those 200 paraeducators, 140 are special ed paras who provide support to our students with special needs. They do an incredible job day in and day out, and I think our teachers and certainly our leadership team would all agree we value and appreciate the work that they do in supporting our students throughout the district. The contract you're voting on this evening is a 4-year contract, and from a wage perspective, it calls for a 2.75% general wage increase, which is retroactive to July 1st of 2018. A 3% general wage increase next year, a 3% wage increase in the 3rd year of the contract, and a 3.25% wage increase in the 4th year of the contract. We'll also increase the bus runs from $13.50 a run up to $14.50 a run throughout the course of this contract. And we'll pause there just for a moment just to give some context around these wage increases. So I think you've been seeing the wage increases that we've been approving or that the board has been approving and ratifying over the last several contracts have been in that 2 to 2.25% wage increase. And you can see that these numbers are much larger than that 2 and 2.25%. So every time we sit down and negotiate with a union, we take a look at what the competitive salaries are around comparable districts around the state, and primarily we use DIRG B as our comparison, DIRG B school districts. And since the last time we negotiated a contract with the paras 4 years ago, unfortunately our salaries have become very uncompetitive, and we are at the very bottom of DIRG B. So in honor of the work that our paras do day in and day out with our kids, and in order to help us recruit and retain our paraprofessionals, which we have been struggling in that area, we hope that the board would support this higher than average increase for our hardworking paraprofessionals throughout the district. In addition, we have health changes, health insurance and dental insurance changes, very similar to what we did with the teachers and with the secretaries and some of the other bargaining units that we've ratified over the last several weeks, as we will move our paraprofessionals over to the state partnership plan effective July 1st. And as we've discussed in the past, we feel that this plan is going to provide us with a lot more stability in our healthcare costs than we've experienced over the last several years, as those year-over-year increases have averaged about 2 percentage points below our year-over-year increases. And Chip went through this in the board workshop last week as well, the benefits of making this move. We will increase the healthcare contribution up to 17% with this new contract, and that would be effective July 1st. Another benefit, another reason why we can take advantage of those stable costs with the state partnership plan is the aggressive wellness program that our paraprofessionals and their dependents will take part in. So there'll be mandatory annual preventive visits, mandatory cholesterol screenings, mandatory breast cancer, cervical cancer, mandatory colonoscopies, all at different ages. Folks that have health conditions like diabetes or asthma or heart condition would be required to take part in a disease education and counseling program. And there's some significant penalties if an employee or a dependent does not adhere to that wellness program. So that would include, as we've discussed before, an increase of $100 a month in annual monthly premiums, and then more additional deductibles of $350 an individual and $1,400 for a family. In addition to the healthcare changes, we will increase the pension contribution from 4% to 5% over the course of this contract. And that summarizes most of the changes with this agreement. We'd be happy to answer any questions that the board had.
This is just a small question. sick leave language, you mend it so that it excludes summer school. So what happens if you get sick during summer school?
So it would be an unpaid day. Yeah, so what happened, that's a good question, Cheryl. So, well, for our teachers right now, our teachers that teach summer school, they don't get paid for a sick day. And this was a change that we made with the paras several years ago. And we felt like we needed to make that change to make it more consistent with the practice that we have with our teachers. So.
Are we ready for the vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Rick, Paul's got to get tips on presentation time.
Okay. Next up on the agenda is staff communications and reports and superintendent's report.
Okay, so a few things just to talk about. I was sent a PowerPoint presentation towards the end of the day today, reminding us about March 21st is Down Syndrome Awareness Day, and I'd urge all of you to wear colorful, bright socks on that day to remind us to how we treat each other and those with human needs. And I say that in terms of one of the things I've found very poignant in this, which will go out to our staff, is talking about I don't have special needs. I have the same human needs that we all have. And that's an important piece of language that struck me, and I think is important for us to remember. And so that's this Thursday. Wear your socks in honor of our kids, and keep that in mind. A couple of other things I want to talk about that are kind of more general. You mentioned graduation, people wanting to know. The most likely day would be Thursday, June 13th. That is not for announcement because we don't know what's going to happen in the last 2 weeks. But Thursday, June 13th is most likely graduation day. I'll announce it formally on April 1st, and that will go out to all people, but for those people that are thinking about it. So the last day of school would be Friday the 14th. Thursday night would be graduation. There's a chance it could be the 12th, but the Wednesday the 12th, but to be honest, we prefer a Thursday. It gives more time to build up for graduation. By build up, I mean actually build up the stages and everything else, and it gives our middle schools opportunity to use that area for their own moving on ceremonies during that week. So Thursday's actually kind of our preferred graduation day. A little inside secret. Other things that I want to mention, April 4th, Career Fair at Conard. It's something we do every year. People that want to work in West Hartford, people that are starting to be teachers, or people that want to be administrators. We have principals, administrators, and teachers there interviewing and meeting people, local people in colleges or people in other places around the state. We'll have a lot of jobs posted before then. That's one of the things we want, to bring those people in so we can meet, talk a little bit there, and maybe set up a future more formalized interview. So it's one of the largest career fairs around in the area, and it's a great night. If you want to stop by, you're more than welcome. So that's at Conard, and 4 to 6. And if you know people, I have plenty of those to send out. I want to talk also about, we've had questions. Well, first, a reminder, I'm on dates. West Hartford's Cooking, March 30th. That is Saturday in a week and a half. A great night, and benefits Foundation for West Hartford Public Schools. So get your tickets. You can get them online. Our guidelines for our drug and alcohol policy is something that's come up during the year, and sometimes it's called a lot of different things. It's not really a policy, it's our guidelines. And under a policy, and that's for behavior, not just of athletes, but also musicians, actors, and those involved in extracurricular activities. And we've had questions about this year, and I want to thank Andy and our principals who have met, and Andy Mayo from Performing and Fine Arts, and Jason Siegel, our athletic director, who've talked about this, and does this meet our needs? And as we looked at it, from when it was written to when it was adopted, if you had asked me, I would have said, oh, just a couple years ago, but it's 10 to 15 years ago now. And we've talked to other schools in the area. Are we where we want to be with it? We've had feedback from kids and from parents at times. And so instead of putting something forward that we write in committee and then bring to the policy committee as an introduction, talk about at the table, which we would, we feel like we want to do more research. So Andy, our principals, those people that I talked about, will begin next school year to look at focus groups of parents, focus groups of students, talk to our coaches, talk to our teachers, and put things together that we're all agreeing on, that we can set forth that if you are going to represent West Hartford Public Schools in one way or another, this is what it requires. So I just wanted to give you an update on that, and we'll be talking about that as the year goes on next year.
What do you think the timeline would be to have that project completed?
It will
So
be
we
in
have
the
a
fall.
sense.
My sense is the fall. We'd work on it and begin putting it together in the summer, and then have the fall, we'd be looking at that project probably, and I would say by the end of the fall, bring it to the board.
Great, thank you.
Is this the same policy or a different policy about other behavioral restrictions?
It all falls into that, and that's the question that comes up. It all falls into it, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily, depending on the situation. There are things that happen. There's things that happen that if I'm a coach on a team, I've put my rules out for you at the beginning of the year. You've been a member of the team where a coach has done that. They may not coincide completely with the policy or guidelines of the school, but I may also say, no, but you did this. Our team has agreements. You didn't meet it. You're sitting this game, or you can't be on the team. And as long as that coach has gone through that with the athletic director, the principal, those things we support. I mean, we've had that happen with an understanding of all the discussions that go on in place. So, yes, it is the overarching guidelines, but I don't want to pretend it's the only guidelines that can take place. So, yeah. So we'll have more on that. And then, lastly, I do think as superintendent, and you all know I, as a trustee of the College Board, Operation Varsity Blues has been in the news a lot. And this was the cheating scandal and the side door scandal, as people call it, with admission to many American universities. And a lot of cautionary flags are raised about a lot of the things that we do in education, a lot of the way we talk about things. And it's really kind of, it happened at the same time, and it really broke the same time I was speaking to the Connor junior class last Wednesday. And the week before, I spoke to the Hall junior class, something I do every year and I've done since I was principal, where I talk about your profile, what you put online, and how that's going to affect us in the future. I talk about interview skills, not just for colleges, but for life. And we do mock interviews with a couple of students in front of all of their classmates. And I sit on stage and kind of point out what those kids did wrong, which I talk to the kids about. I'll take care of you afterwards. And try to make it good and fun and engaging. But I've also been talking more and more, especially this year, before this happened and while it's happening. Because when I talk to kids at the end of the year, and I brought this up before, I talked to the seniors. Rosine and I will talk to seniors at both schools about what their experience have been. Because I worry about the same things that we talk about here. I don't want somebody doing something for pressure. And I'll ask them, I feel like The only kids I'm trying to put pressure on live at 27 Bellcrest in my house. The kids that are in our classes, I do believe we want to make sure they have the opportunities to excel. And I want to make sure we push them to be the best students they can be as people also. And I've talked about this, and one thing that becomes clear to me every year, because sometimes I'll get accused of, well, you're putting pressure on kids, do this, and I'm like, when I talk to kids, they don't blame me. And I've heard kids time after time question their parents, and this is, I don't want to come across as if I'm lecturing parents, but 3 years in a row I've had the comment said to me, Mr. Moore, sometimes I wonder if my parents care more about what bumper sticker is going to go on their car. And that pressure about what does it mean? I mean, we have fetishized as a society, and in West Hartford, the so-called elite institutions. And we have kids believe that that's your ticket to success and it's your only ticket to success. And with the Common App, we know those are more and more difficult to get into. And as the proud product of a great state university, I try to tell everybody, this is, you learn wherever you go. And what you get is what you're going to put into it. And you need to find the right place for you. And so as I get asked this question, because there's a lot of things, the SAT didn't cheat. The College Board didn't cheat. People got fake 504s, which I see today in our schools where somebody does not need extended time till junior year, and then we get a note from our doctor. And we have no choice because the way legislation was passed. Okay? And so all of a sudden, that kid has extended time. Didn't need it until junior year. Now that can happen. I'm not saying that every time it happens it's false. Somebody could have a concussion. Somebody could have something happen that leads to that. But that's not what it always is. It's people gaming systems. And I just think that we game systems, and as we've all said about this, we're doing our kids a disservice. And it's not just because we're teaching them to cheat. It's because we're acting as if there's only one path to success. And that this name is what's going to get you success. That name is never going to get you success. Who you are is what's going to get you success. But if people want to ask questions about what's happened or the role or colleges, I am happy. Call my office to talk about that, talk about any of the issues that have come forth or where we are in West Hartford. And I'll finish with one thing. If you are paying for college prep services and you're paying it because that is forcing my kid to sit down and actually do college prep, all right, I'll let you go at that point. But if you think you're getting better college prep services than Khan Academy, which is designed and vetted with the Khan Academy and the College Board so that it's taking your actual scores and building your practice based on your actual PSAT and SAT results, you are flat out wrong and you are wasting your money. But people won't listen to me because they believe you get what you pay for, and when something's free, they don't believe it. But I can promise you, and I tell you as somebody who believes in prep and everything else, neither of my kids that have gone through, and now as a junior, I have never paid one dime for prep work. I have logged into Khan Academy and made them log in and make them match, which we do in school, so we have a very good, we try to do that here. So that's a tangent, but it is a part of the superintendent's report that I do think is important that we as a board stand together in a way of talking to kids about stopping the madness. Because when I see people with a dream school, I'm always nervous when somebody says they have one dream school that would be perfect, and what I'm most nervous is that they're going to get in. Because I'm nervous that when they get in, they're going to find out it's not perfect, because nothing's perfect. And those are the kids that sometimes I've seen struggle over the years. So that's my piece on Operation Varsity Blues. That's the superintendent's report.
Tom, I'd like to follow up, go back to the policy if I could, make sure I fully understand. So if I understand properly, going to take a look at the whole policy, kind of do a major review of it, rework it. Will it be ready by the start of the school year?
No, we're not planning on doing it we're not doing it in the spring. It won't be ready at the start of the school year.
Oh, okay.
Now, what we have said is that we believe right now with what is in there, that depending on interpretation of something, that it certainly allows you to do what you'd like to do. And we will operate, and Andy agrees with this, as do the principals, that anything that's considered hate speech or a hate crime certainly would operate under that drug alcohol policy and extended behaviors. So that's how we will be operating with the current policy.
And that could apply whether it's an athlete, a soloist.
Completely.
Right.
That's the thing
Lead
we
dancer.
need to remember, or the president of a club at one of our schools. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking a question, because I was going to let it go, but with the policy for athletes, and I understand it and I actually support it, as I understand it. If said athlete gets caught drinking and said student with no activities gets caught drinking, the punishment is different, right?
Well, if it's a Saturday night, we get a report from the police that these students were ticketed with alcohol. The fact is, there is no school punishment for somebody that's not involved in extracurricular activities or sports because it didn't happen during the school day. Now, if they're involved in sports, theater, music, all of those things, it does trigger their ability to participate in extracurricular activities.
You said that things like hate crimes and stuff would be in there, and I think that's great, but I also want to make sure that non-hate crimes are also in there. Like if you punch someone, regardless of why you punch them.
Yes, all those. I mean, I can give you all copies of it.
No, I just want to make sure.
Absolutely, all those. We're going to hold our students to a very high standard during this time. The fact is, different people can interpret guidelines and things different ways. I never want a guideline to be, I'm not a big fan of zero tolerance in terms of anything, because show me somebody with an absolute rule for everything and I'll show you somebody afraid to make a decision. If you have guidelines in place, and this is what we go forward, so that kids understand, this, and this is why we changed it. It used to be, you got caught drinking, smoking, boom, you're off the team. Well, while it is a preventative measure, it also takes that kid and sends them into okay, now you're done. Well, what's my incentive? The way we have it now is 4 weeks, whereas you're still practicing with the team, but you're not dressing for games. And that policy, I think, has worked. But then there's been pieces with it in terms of captaincy, leadership positions, a second offense, a self-reported offense. Those are the things we want our kids, our parents, and our community all to talk about. Okay, well, is this the best way to move forward?
I just want to say thank you, Tom, for your comment in regard to the current scandal bit that's going on. And I feel compelled just to piggyback on that. In addition to what you've shared in terms of how it's highlighted the disillusion that if you get into this particular school, you certainly have a ticket. This scandal has unfortunately also highlighted the disparity of privilege and the disparity of opportunities that are afforded to different populations, and the unfortunate reality that for many individuals, especially people of color or people of different abilities, you may have to work 10 times harder than your counterpart, and you're still questioned thereafter. So this is bringing a lot more of those issues to attention. They've been there for a while, but people are now speaking about it more often.
Actually, Lorna, you hit on something that's probably my single biggest philosophical in education is college for everyone? And that question gets brought up a lot of the time to people. And I'm stuck on I don't think it's going to hurt to keep learning for 2 or 4 more years. And here's my worry about, because I have people all the time, and I come from a family of the trades. My brothers all work construction. My dad did, provided a good life for me. I love them and support them. I worry, though, when people say college isn't for everyone, too often they're pointing at kids that don't look like them and think, well, it's not for them. That's what I'm trying to protect against when I see all the push of we need to prepare kids to go into manufacturing and welding, and we need this. Well, which kids are you exactly talking about? Because I don't want to set up false avenues where we can make ourselves feel better because people are getting jobs, but we're still robbing them of opportunities because of our preconceived notions. So that's something that I deeply think about as superintendent and I worry about all the time. And I don't have a great answer yet. I'll let you know when I do.
I just want to comment on that because I always say, is college for everyone or is college for everyone right away? And that's where your gap year comes in or some other things. So I may not be ready to go to college as soon as I graduate from high school. Perhaps I want to take a gap year or suppose I want to try working full-time and just kind of getting a lay of the lamb. And then after that first year from graduating from high school and I see some of the responsibilities that come with working full-time, then perhaps I may want to take a class or two at a local community college to sort of understand what the responsibility is and what it all entails in terms of being a part-time student, and then eventually stepping up to a full-time student, perhaps taking advantage of the employer's tuition reimbursement. So there's some options out there, and again, as you spoke to it, students of color sometimes are unaware of that because they're usually the first going to college and they don't know that other options exist, unlike what we've just, read and heard about in the news of late.
I just want to say one thing really quickly about the whole thing. It resonated with me a lot just because we're both in the throes of it right now, figuring out where we're going to school next year. And one thing I was thinking a lot about during my own college process, I felt like so much from like teachers and other people, I was asked kind of like the names of the schools I wanted to go to. I didn't feel like I was asked as much always about like, well, do I want a big school or do I want a small school or do I want a research school or like that type of thing. And I felt like just as like a district, we could do so much better and not focusing on as much on names and what stickers going on your car and what t-shirt you're wearing on college shirt day, and being more about what you're interested in, what programs you want to go into. And I'll just end by saying I kind of, everyone says it doesn't matter where you go, but it was hard for me to kind of realize that until this summer. I was doing an internship and I was with two people, and one went to Yale and one went to CCSU, and they were doing the same thing at the same place. And I realized that we really can do anything with whatever education you get, because it's about, getting that education. So I think just as a district, if we work harder on encouraging, going into what you love and instead of going to a school with a name that you love would be important.
Yeah, not to be a dead horse, but Tom's comment about being a product of having a degree from a state school resonates with me as being from the same state school. But I also have the experience of having gone to a private institution. So I would just echo what everybody said here, that it's really the life experience for each individual. So you're right, Tom. Like I don't think extra education hurts anybody, and I don't think you should point a finger at any certain population, but each individual needs to figure out what that life experience should be, right? It isn't necessarily college, it isn't necessarily the trades. There are people in my extended family that have done both and have been very successful. And sometimes I question whether I needed that extended education based on where I am right now. And I think as a student, that's the hardest thing to figure out, right? Is where you think you want to be right now and then where you're going to be when you're old, like the rest of us. So, I think that's the advice maybe West Hartford could work harder to do, is that instead of having that tunnel vision about, you're right, are you going to such a name school? Is like, well, what experience do you as an individual hope to gain, and where does that take you? And so maybe that's something we could do better at. I don't know.
I agree with that, and I agree with what everyone's sharing. And I also think it emphasizes the importance of our responsibility to properly prepare our young people, yes, to certainly know who you want to be as a person, to certainly build your skill set. Many times I've talked about the importance of being strong at your core, of knowing who you are. And that's our responsibility because, unfortunately, the reality is outside of these walls or this town, not everyone has that perspective of, I value you as a person and tell me who you are and what your area of interests are. They're going to judge you based on what you look like. I'm a fourth-generation college graduate. I have my doctorate degree. I still get questioned, and I still get at times treated as if, I'm just no one. And if it weren't for me having the value system that I was raised with and being confident in who I am, and when I come across those individuals who are judging and will say condescending, mean things, then I would crumble. But I don't. Unfortunately, I just look at them and I bless your heart and I keep it moving. And that's our responsibility in working with our young people as well, that we must ensure that as they're going through the learning process, most importantly, they're learning who they are and they're finding value in who they are, no matter what situation or circumstance they're in.
I just want to make a comment that has nothing to do with high school and nothing to do with how we can do with help our kids. But I think as human beings, maybe we can act, or as citizens, which is to go back to what you said in the very beginning, Lorna, which is that they call it a side door, but that's because there's a back door. And I have to call attention to that because the fact is, as we all know, if some of those families had just given money to those schools, their kid would have gotten in. If you go to a school, there's lots of ways in which people with privilege get more privilege. And I think that, and whether that's race, class, both, is less important than that. It seems to me that we owe it to our kids to engage in that kind of conversation, not only among us as families, but to push back against some of the colleges that are behaving that way and saying, if it's merit, then it should be merit. So.
And next up at the table, I see a little change, though.
I'll defer my time to my old man.
So, yes, so we have at the table, okay, so Rick is making his way to the table for our personnel report, staff reports, and board discussion.
This was planned.
I am that excited to give my report that I'm up here.
There's some emulation here that needs to take place, Paul.
So you see our personnel report on page 9 of your board packet is rather small this month. He recognizes the changes that have happened over the last couple of weeks since our report last February, or last month, I should say. So we are heading into the spring, and we have multiple teacher career fairs that we will be attending. Tom had mentioned that we will be hosting our own on April 4th, Thursday evening, and I would definitely reiterate what Tom had said and invite you to that fair. And Tom gave a great overview of what happens that evening. It does give us an opportunity to meet with several hundred teachers who come in and want to work with West Hartford and determine who we would like to invite in for a more deeper and richer interview at a later date, but also gives us an opportunity to show West Hartford to these aspiring teachers. And the minute you walk in the door, we have students there helping us direct the teachers in terms of where to go in the building. We have students playing music further down the corridor. Dave, you joined us last year at the event. I think it's well done. Our staff does a phenomenal job of really expressing what West Hartford is really about, and it is about the kids. And you see that expressly that evening. So if you have a chance on April 4th between 4 and 6, even if it's just for a few minutes, stop in, say hello to some of the teachers. They'll be in the cafeteria having some refreshments after their stressful interviews, and you can just say hello to them. That would be great. A couple of other events that we have our Correct Minority Teacher Recruiting Fair next Thursday, March 28th, and that is a signature event for us in terms of our minority recruiting. we will have about 5 or 6 administrators and teachers with us at that event next week. And if you remember last fall or this past fall, we talked about our success this year in terms of minority recruiting. It really helps us to get a head start at this event. This year, 24% of our new teachers were teachers of color, so we're hoping to build on that success, starting with this event at the Correct Minority Teacher Career Fair next week. We also have on April 2nd, the Central Connecticut State University Teacher Career Fair, and then April 4th, which is the same day as our Conard Fair, we have the NEAG School of Education Career Fair that morning out at UConn, and both of those events have been great events for us in terms of welcoming new teachers into West Hartford. We end up hiring 5 or 6 teachers from that event as well. So that's highlights some of the recruiting that's going to be happening over the next 4 to 5 weeks, and we'll keep you updated as we move into the spring in terms of how well we do. So that summarizes this month's personnel report. Be happy to answer any questions that the board had.
Thank you. Can you tell me what's the difference between an interim teacher and what I imagine is a long-term substitute teacher?
Yeah.
As listed in the personnel.
So we have really 3 categories of teachers that we will hire. We will hire a contracted teacher who's a teacher that will hire on a contract for the entire school year and really indefinitely. So when we hire you on a contract, you know that you're going to be here indefinitely. An interim teacher is someone who's filling in for someone who's out on a leave. So that's someone who's going to be here for anywhere from 40 days to an entire school year. So if you have a teacher going out on maternity leave and they know they're not going to work for the entire school year, we'll replace that teacher with an interim teacher for the school year. And their contract will actually end on June 30th. In fact, next month in our personnel report in April, the board will actually vote on non-renewing those interim contracts, and that's something that we have to do by state statute every year. And then a long-term sub is a teacher that we would hire for anywhere from 20 days to 40 days. So they wouldn't get benefits. So that'd be someone that would fill in for up to 40 days, and then from 40 days up until an entire school year, that would be an interim contract. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Sure. You're welcome.
Just Rick, real quick, do you take any of the 40-day long-term subs, turn them into interim if they work out, or is that a
They do, yeah.
All right.
So sometimes we'll get someone who will be out on a medical leave, and they'll say they'll be out for 4 weeks. That gets extended for another couple months. So if they go beyond that 40 days, we'll convert them into an interim contract. And we hire a lot of our interim teachers from year to year as contracted teachers the following year, and you'll see that in our opening school report because it gives us a great opportunity to see them, get to learn about their teaching, they get to learn about us, and many times they move right into that contracted position the following year. So we hire probably from one year to the next, I'd say 20 of our new teachers in September would have been interim teachers the year before.
Thank you, Rick. And
You may get your teacher certificate after this little.
I'll work to mentor Rick to put some more of those details into his reports in the future.
okay. Next up is our 5-year curriculum review process. And at the table, we're joined by Mr. Paul Vicinas and Mrs. Carrie Jones will report.
Good evening, and thank you. It's always a privilege to be able to present to the board, and typically we're up here and we're talking about the continuous and ongoing accolades of our students. And it goes without saying that a lot of those results are really evidence of the hard work of our teachers and certainly our support staff, our specialists, our paraeducators. But when you enter any classroom and you look beneath the classroom environment, the extremely supportive classroom environment, you look underneath the skilled pedagogy that's ongoing with the teachers, it's the vibrant and dynamic vibrant and dynamic curriculum that really is at the heart of the content that the students are learning. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight, is how our 5-year curriculum review process is instrumental to ensure the vitality and the relevance of that curriculum and our responsiveness to both outward and interior influences to it. And so by outward influences to our curriculum, I'm talking about new standards. And in the last 6 years, we've realistically seen new standards across almost every discipline that we instruct, to include, everything from math, English language arts, to visual arts and music and our performing arts. And you heard a little bit about that with science last time. Other outward influences are the emergent needs of our community, the workforce, or society. And we see this with our growing computer science field. We see this with the institution of Chinese language in our middle school pathways to really speak to relevance of our world languages for our graduates in terms of what it means to be a global citizen. And finally, another outward influence, just as an example, would be new technology. And we see that's impacted in terms of how we teach research, certainly how we teach visual arts, for example, and other things. In addition to outward influences, there are internal influences. Student needs or interests. Carrie's co-chaired a dyslexia work group that's done a significant amount of work based on new legislation that's had an impact for our foundational literacy programming in grades K and 1. Student needs relative to, we have a significant number of students with intensive academic needs, and we developed specific programming for them. We've had systemic influences that influence our curriculum, such as, at the building level, the fact that we have an auto tech lab at one of our high schools and not another, and that kind of drives what kinds of programs we may offer. But also there are niche courses, British literature at Hall High School, that while we've tried to we've offered courses at 2 different high schools, students at one school for one reason or another may just be drawn to it, and so that program thrives, and it may not at another. And lastly, we have internal influences that are based on our leadership or our vision, and I think we see a lot of this work over the last several years as it's manifested from our work with cultural competence. So I can go back several years to where we first developed a course called United States History from the African American Experience. More recently, our music programming, Voices of the World. And we have an ongoing partnership with community partners to look at our U.S. history. So it's beneath it all that this 5-year curriculum review process helps to ensure the vitality. And in the written report beginning on page 10, you see the components of that. But rather than talk to you right now, I just want to highlight some of those outcomes that we've had beyond some of the short examples I've given. As a result of our 5-year curriculum review process, we've had a greater emphasis in professional development in mathematics at the secondary level with a focus on problem solving. At the elementary level, it's been on cognitive engagement or rigor and tasks. We've had formalized program and instruction on foundational literacy in grades K and 1. Revision and improvement to teaching about religion within social studies across grades K through 12. We've had inclusion of informational literacy within social studies and science, and new courses at the high school level to include cryptography and cybersecurity, emergency medical responder training, personal health and fitness, international business, and many, many more. So at the end of the day, it is this 5-year review process where every curriculum, every program gets looked at through a self-assessment by a vertical team of the actual teachers, the stakeholders, the service providers who teach it on a daily basis, led by the instructional leadership for that program, that gets juried by the curriculum council, a group of instructional leaders K through 12 that are essentially a critical friends group, folks that have related experience in that help to ensure the relevance of the curriculum and keep us in that model of continuous improvement. So with that, I'd open it up to your questions.
Thank you. I just had probably 2 related questions about getting information to the teachers or to the developers. Part of developing new curriculum means bringing new information out or new skills out or whatever, and whether that's teachers bringing it into the classroom or teachers bringing it into course development and curricular development, what kind of mechanisms do you have to provide that training to the teachers in the first place so that they're not saying we should do something and then making it up as they go along?
Absolutely. This is an outstanding question that I know Carrie can speak to, because in her role, this is a huge component of what she's responsible for in terms of pre-K through 5 literacy across multiple subject areas and the district CSI calendar and how that's utilized.
So I'm going to think about a fairly concrete example that might help us kind of guide. So I'm thinking about something like geography. It's something we can probably all relate to. And in our social studies curriculum review in 15-16, we realized, and I'll speak to elementary because that's what I can speak to best, we realized we didn't really have a coherent set, a progression of skills and knowledge for students in pre-K to 5. So, you know, students might have learned about a compass in kindergarten in this classroom, and then in 5th grade again, there was no real sense of progression. And our new standards that come out in social studies, geography being one of the key domains of social studies, along with economics and civics and history. And these are really foundational skills as we move toward the upper grades and you're studying about world regions. It really was important for students to understand place. And so we developed, through our curriculum review process, we realized we had no sense of progression. And so that was really a first step. So for teachers to understand, to even begin to think about how to teach this in my classroom, we really had to set a framework, and a progression was the start to that. So for most of the time, it's really stepping back and thinking, what's the learning progression before you even begin to think about what are the lessons and what are the resources. It's really framing it out. So we have a progression that talks about exploring maps and creating maps and identifying and locating things and determining distance and direction. That starts with the neighbor, even in the school, to neighborhood, to town, to state, to region. And so it's a very clear progression. And that then helps students in 4th and 5th grade understand things like colonization and things like how does our state work, and we have giant state maps now and all those pieces. And then we build, and if you can look on page 11, so we have a clear sense, number one, of our content, skills, and understandings. We develop pacing guides and curricular maps or guides for teachers that are really frameworks within that help teachers kind of say, how much time should it take? Now, in this case of geography, we really left it open to teachers to say, you know, you might have a little bit of time here or there. It might make the choice of where this fits best for your students, where this relates best. You might have students who come in talking about something, about a trip they went on, or about it's in mathematics, this works really well. You're talking about measurement. You're working in science here. So with geography, we left the timing of that a little more open-ended for teams to make the choice. In other curricular areas, we're very explicit to say this mathematics unit makes sense here because there's a clear progression of learning. So it really depends on the content. There are shared learning experiences. So each 4th grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade student has an experience with a giant traveling map that fills the space of this whole area that is the state of Connecticut. And they stand on it and they, where are the rivers? Where are the pieces that take place? Assured experiences every child has. So we have professional learning. And in some cases, it's through our CSI, our Wednesday early release times. In other cases, it's someone like Ashley Callan, our curriculum specialist, going into the schools, or Mary Listini was in last week, and doing mathematics and measurement on the giant traveling map with students. So actually physically going in with students, modeling, working with the teachers themselves. So really that number 5 is the part where we come back to teachers and back to our curriculum specialists and principals and say, is this working? We have written curriculum, you're teaching it, you come back to us in assessment, how is this working? So that's our 5-year review process, but every year and throughout the year, we're coming back and asking for that feedback.
That makes total sense, thank you. But I was also thinking about, I teach African American history, for example, and you can't just say to somebody, you should teach African American history. You can't even give someone a textbook and say, here, teach African American history. If they don't know it, if they don't know the content, the teachers don't know the content, they don't know how to teach it. So that's what I mean. Are you able to bring in experts in various spots where teachers don't have the expertise?
Without a doubt. So where we need trainers, we'll bring them in. But that was, at the end of the day, The written curriculum is a shared document along with the key teaching points that would be there. And any, Carrie mentioned assured learning experiences, any experience that we want to make sure is guaranteed across every classroom is written right into the curriculum. The teachers will receive professional development on that. At the elementary level, that's what's happening with some of the district-wide CSI time. And at the secondary level, it's happening right there in the departments with your content experts, and it's not unusual. In fact, our English Language Arts department has a group, 2 presenters that we've been partnering with for repeated professional learning time this year that are just doing outstanding work working with our teachers, teaching them about collaborative conversations within English Language Arts and eliciting evidence of student thinking. So where we need folks, we have them, and then we also have our instructional coaches.
Yeah, and I think I think you hit on something, that there's a variety of levels of how much training can we do. We have to be careful about who we hire in that balance. We're both historians. There's a social studies certification. I've maintained, and a lot of people don't agree, I'd like there to be a split in the certification, a history and a social sciences certification, because, and I don't worry about it here because we have the benefits of scale. We can take teachers and say, well, these are our U.S. history people, these are our psychology people, because we can hire for those positions. Smaller districts can't do it across state, and that can run into some troubles. One of the things I do want to talk about with the curriculum review process is it's a 5-year process, but when we look at it 5 years ago, we had 20 kids taking computer science, and I'm not talking AP, I'm talking anything that would be kind of falling under computer science. And now we did the course selections the other day, we're at over 200 between the 2 schools. So this kind of keeping up with and reacting to, as I think you were also talking about, what are the shifts that are going on out there, and how do you do that with the staff that's already been hired perhaps, and maintaining both the current training. And it's also something where when people are talking about getting their masters, I think it's safe to say that during the non-tenure review process, a lot of our teachers don't have their masters yet. And one of the things that's discussed a lot of times is, you know what I think you need boning up in, or what will help you here is if your focus studies over in your master's degree were in this area. So that's something that also happens during the non-tenure review process that we don't really talk about. That's more secondary than elementary, I think. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, one other thing, is the vertical teaming. What Carrie's talking about is having some idea of what's happened. When I first came to West Hartford, it was like making a dream catcher was in kindergarten, 5th grade, and 7th grade, and then in some course in high school, where kids had made it a bunch of times, and you'd come in and people didn't. I think this process helps to kind of catch those things too.
Thanks. Thank you so much for mentioning the Auto Tech Lab, for example. It's been my privilege to get to know the tech ed folks over my time on the board and all that they do. And it's just as much of an educational process as math or English or something like that. They work on a lesson plan. They do that. But one thing that I've learned is, in addition to a textbook that they might need, it's also equipment that's involved, and modern, up-to-date equipment. Is that an issue? Is that a problem keeping up with what they need?
I will say that our Career and Technical Education Department has the great benefit of the Perkins Grant, which really has enabled them to stay current in terms of their resource acquisition. When the 3D printer first came out, that was a huge thing, and it was a feather in our cap to have one. And now we have them at each building, and I don't know if we have one off the top of my head. We might have one that is used at the middle schools as well, and it's helped to grow the different offerings. So between that, and between certainly what happens with capital improvements in general, and whether it's CTE or whether it's the science labs that the board was able to support at Hall High School and things of this nature, it does help, and it's an important add in terms of infrastructure for our schools to make sure that we are staying current. PE equipment does wear out over time and things of this nature, so they're just things that we have to continue to invest in.
I was curious. I was looking over the indicators and saw interesting. But what about how do you react to the situations where, regardless of how thorough this process is, the reality on the ground of teachers that are implementing curriculum on the fly because of the way it just kind of happens where it gets dumped on them, and how stressful that can be for our teacher population, and what resources or how do you guys provide support there, or where are the outlets?
Yeah, if I understand you, I mean, in terms of teaching on the fly or not teaching the curriculum to fidelity, that really becomes an evaluation and support. You know, the role of our supervisors at the secondary level. If I have a teacher who's maybe, you know, and I'll use an example of go back to the interim question. Maybe I have someone that's, you know, out suddenly on a medical leave, and someone new is thrust into a situation and doesn't have that experience. That's where our supervisors are going to step in, and they're going to be able to provide that support that's needed, and hopefully have their hands on the pulse of that situation so that our students aren't impacted. In the case where, you know, someone isn't necessarily following a curriculum and we're expecting them, if I'm hearing you sort of hint around that, then again, that supervisor, whether it be the principal at an elementary level or a content person or a principal at the secondary level, is going to go in and they're going to have more frequent visitations in that classroom and do two things. Number one, make sure that they're documenting that and providing the support to the teacher to figure out what's holding them back. Number two, making sure that the students are getting what they need.
I was thinking about it a little bit differently.
Okay.
That's all well and good. I'm thinking more of teachers in situations where you guys are doing these curriculum reviews, and maybe the rollout isn't in such a way that the staff has sufficient time maybe to lesson plan for it?
Reaction time and lesson planning.
So what do you do then where, you know, it's happening during the course of the year, right? Where it's not even like they had all summer. So what's being done on the ground to provide resources or assistance in those situations?
Well, a couple of things. Certainly I'd go back to, you know, first and foremost, our primary mechanism to get teachers up to speed with those changes is going to happen through that consistent CSI times on Wednesdays. Then at the elementary level and at the secondary level, there is a structure for either course team time or grade level time, and that's typically weekly, where I can get together, and if I'm not talking about student outcomes, I may be talking about changes. You heard Carrie mention she might have one of her townwide curriculum specialists coming in and working with a team at a grade level to explain it. I can tell you that in the implementation, say, of those new standards in ELA and math, when they all hit at the same time, that was a huge pressure valve for teachers, because there was just, you know, volumes of change that were hitting them, and we did our best to manage it. But at the elementary level, it was 2 content areas. We tried to implement them 1 year at a time. At the secondary level, hey, I could be teaching 2-3 different courses that has brand new curriculum in it, and it's like becoming a first year teacher all over again. So those can be very real challenges. I think that we're over the hump of that relative to the volume of changes in standards, but it's something that we're mindful for. We do have structures, but the number one thing you hear from our teachers all the time, we wish there was more time in the day. We wish there was more time in a school year. It's absolutely true.
So great comment there about the time. So do you guys ever consider, like with the CSI time, like allowing them more flex time there instead of, like, I know you guys have your official meetings and things that you want to do in mass, but to your point about the time, do you hear that a lot, where it's like, well, if we just had more of that programmable time on Wednesday to deal with these exact issues, that would be beneficial, and could that be worked in more?
We hear all the time about ideas about our CSI time, and here's what we go back to our leaders with. We need to make sure that the time that we're asking, with the tasks that we're asking teachers to engage in during our CSI time, is valuable. We expect it to be something that's going to help support them in terms of their professional learning or their work. So if it's new curriculum, and I can point to lots of places where we've provided a lot of support to release valves as best we can within the mechanisms of a day. But we also have teachers who say, hey, I need time to help me with correcting. I need more time to help me. And so it's sort of like we prioritize and say, I can't help you with those parts during that professional learning time, but I'll make sure, and we hear that sometimes at the district level. We hear, hey, this CSI time hasn't been well spent. And we talk with that supervisor and say, time is so valuable, it needs to be well spent on these Wednesdays.
Can I give you a concrete example? I'll give you a little concrete example. Grade 1 science, new science curriculum this year, brand new science curriculum. We had 4 units of study. We got the feedback that it's just too much this year. It's year 1 of implementation. We met as a work group team of teachers actually implementing this. We got the feedback live in the past 2 months, month and a half. We had a planned session for next week. We pulled back and we surveyed the teachers of where they were in implementing. If anyone's listening out there, you have a little preview. We're going to hold back on implementing the last unit. There's no science police out there at first grade right now. We're holding back an implementation. We're finding out where teachers really are in real time, and we're saying we're not going to rush on this. So the plants are still in our office. Remember, Ann mentioned the stuff in our office. The plants are still there for next week, and we were responsive to that live this year, and we're being responsive, and we're finding out where teachers are live right now and providing them the actual support they need for the next little run and redesigning our time frame. So as much as we can be live to that support, because they're implementing new things, if they're often the building-based time, they may be sort of questioning each other. So there are times when coming together as a department or as a grade level can be really helpful because they're going to learn from each other across the district. So, it's back and forth. We try to really vary the time between building-based time and some department or district-based time because they can really gain some insight from each other across the district. So, real live example of literally what's happening next week.
Thank you. I think I dominated enough. But no, that was great responses, and it's great to hear you guys are tuned into that because I think that's like the number one issue.
Anybody else? I have a question. And my question is around the African American experience in terms of your 5-year curriculum review, in terms of what you look at, in terms of tweaks that you may want to make from the past and looking ahead. So my question is, one, what are some things that you, pull upon or kind of bring into your decision making? And how do you go about, one, rolling it out, and two, do you take in, I'm sure you do, into consideration any state mandates or right now, I know that there's a House bill around introducing African American history in public schools around the state. It's not law yet, but if it becomes a law, how do we enhance and implement that at the local level?
I'll handle that and let you handle the individual piece, but this is in some ways my area with history. Any legislation that's at the State House about African American history this year, Hispanic studies this year, labor law last year, Holocaust studies last year, this happens every year, and nobody's ever going to go testify against it because why would you? We all believe all of those things should be taught. But they're not passing a curriculum. I mean, it is the most limited sentence. When I see mailers, I push for this legislation. I'm like, listen, if any Board of Ed didn't have something going on where, because it's not talking about a class to be offered. Those bills have zero impact on West Hartford Public Schools because everything that they're talking about we have in our curriculum. If we don't have them in our curriculum, you should fire him first and then me the next day. Carrie, you can stick around. Because that's really the kind of focus those laws are so general And I've been in rooms where people say, well, you shouldn't because we're only a K-6 school district, and I've argued with those superintendents. You don't think you should ever mention the Holocaust during a K-6 year? Now, the pushback would be something Mark spoke about before. Is that really the state's role, or is it a local board of ed's role to decide on a curriculum? Because there is a push, and I was at a meeting last week where people said, wouldn't it be easier if we just had a state curriculum for different subjects? And based on the states that have state curriculum, my answer is no. Because everything becomes an issue then, and everything becomes a fight. And so as far as the state legislation, anytime you see any of that that's about a subject area, I will say that that's not going to have a big impact. But now
That's why I asked the question, because I wanted that to be clear.
Exactly. That those are the kind of things that just, they're getting to the basic roots. And in fact, both years when those have been proposed, I've been asked to provide our curriculum for our genocide studies class last year when the Holocaust studies class, the Holocaust study subject came up, and this year our U.S. history through the African American experience, as examples of this is what district could be doing. But now in terms of the one thing I'll say before I'll turn it over to Paul, this is why the Director of Diversity Advancement is so important. I want to stress to people this isn't just about professional development in a way in terms of are we making sure we're thinking about all of our kids and how they're welcome or our open choice coming in. Rosina's a critically important piece of our curriculum development also. And that's the thing frankly, the way the job's been designed, it hasn't been enough time in that I think has to be looking at all of our curriculum with that lens, especially history curriculum. But Paul, I'll turn it over to you and Carrie.
Yeah, I won't. There's not too much more I can add, but I'll highlight a couple of things. Obviously, you know that the work with cultural competence and the work that Rosina does has been a big focus for the district for the last several years, and it's definitely had an impact within our curriculum, not only within our resources and what texts we're using, what materials we're presenting. We just had a huge diversity book fair at the elementary level. We've the library media specialists at all levels have looked over things and so on. It's having an impact on our pedagogy. That's the next piece of work that Rosina is working with my office on. We have a structure in place relative to the Professional Learning and Evaluation Committee that Rosina is a steering member of, a co-chair of. She comes with me with representative from Rick's office, with Carrie and Ann and myself, and we look at what are the big ticket items, what are the big pushes in the district, and how do we basically actualize them, make them actionable within our systems, and that's been the work that we have been doing. Relative to your more specific question about African American history, I mean, we had a great community conversation that we've launched into where we say we recognize that the treatment of African American history within United States history has been that of victimization as opposed to that of celebration of accomplishments, or right down to how our language is used. Do we talk about people being slaves, or do you talk about enslaved people? And making those small twists and having that better perspective is work that West Hartford will lead this state with. West Hartford I will tell you, this is a problem in our country, and West Hartford will lead this country with. So I am confident that we have the right structure for that. I'm not so sure Tom's got the order of firing people in correct, but I'm confident that we're going to get there.
I just wanted to follow up with a question that I hadn't thought about till you said it. As I understand it, your point about the curriculum is not just to make sure that a course in, say, African American history or a course in the Holocaust or whatever is being taught, but that the subject is being taught to everyone in some way across the grade level, across up and down the grades. I mean, is that Is that correct?
You are correct. I mean, that was a point I got lost in my own statement. I was getting excited. In our curriculum review process, since we've embarked on this work with cultural competence in such a significant way, one of the big changes that we made to the curriculum review process was to ensure that lens found its way across those 5 indicators of, what are the content skills and understandings, and what's the equity lens to that? What do the resources look like, standard 2? What do the assured learning experiences look like? When we look at our student assessment data, how does that tease itself out relative to looking at a focus across different groups and then the curriculum alignment overall? So that is now an embedded part of this 5-year process and enables us to look at curriculum more holistically and to ensure that we're bringing that work in systemically.
All set? All right, thank you. Did you have a question, Mark? No. Oh, okay.
Just for Tom, we do the forensic audit.
Thank you, Carrie and Paul. Okay, moving to routine matters. Approval of the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of March 5th, 2019. The recommendation that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of March 5th, 2019. May I have a motion? A motion first. And a second?
Second.
Okay, and now discussion, questions. Lorna?
Just wanted to request, please, during the last Board of Ed meeting, a comment was made recognizing the Chocolate Cafe and the hard work of the leaders and the students that participated in that, and just wanted to make sure that was accounted for in the minutes.
All right, ready for the vote? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And no opposed. Motion carries. Next up is information and reports. Do we have any communication and reports from any board members, from boards or organizations? Lorna?
I would like to share a couple of things. One to recognize the Cultural Day celebration held at Charter Oak a weekend ago, 2 weekends ago. It was a wonderful event. It's wonderful to see how diverse our community is and how people can come together to recognize those differences, but also find similarities as well. Also appreciate the teachers and the principal of Sedgwick Middle School. They had their transition meeting yesterday for incoming 6th graders. Parents and children were there. Very much of a nice engagement and very sensitive to parents who are dealing with this, as well as the young people as well. So thank you for that. And I also want to say that I'm very proud of all of our students of West Hartford, and in particular want to point out those students from Charter Oak and also Bugby who participated this past weekend in the state competition for Odyssey of the Mind that was held at Southern Connecticut State University. All of the teams did a wonderful job, and there were 2 teams from Charter Oak that were there to participate, and both teams placed first place in the long-term performance and the spontaneous performance. So both teams will be going to the World Competition in May at Michigan State University. So proud of all of our students, and certainly proud of those that were able to advance to the World Competition.
I just wanted to share that Carol and I had the opportunity to attend a Freedom of Information info session earlier. Was it this week? Oh, last week. Yes, Tuesday of last week. It was good information. Thank you to Essie LeBreau, our town clerk, for putting that on for us. We learned some good things about the minutes. And Cammie, I want to compliment you. The minutes don't have to be verbatim, for example. And I looked at ours afterwards, and I saw how you very succinctly summarized things. Thank you so much for your hard work on that. We also learned, and it was interesting, that a meeting doesn't necessarily involve having a quorum. There's one court decision that says, well, if there wasn't a quorum, it doesn't matter. There's another court decision where it says it doesn't matter if there's a quorum or not. So as a board, we want to be careful when we're together, if we're discussing board business. Let's make sure we limit that to our public meetings, that things are on the agenda, so we can do that. I'd like to get some information. I understand Essie was putting together a summary of it, and hopefully we can get a copy and share that with everyone on the board.
Deb?
I don't want to steal any thunder from Gus or Megan, but a shout out to all of the cast and crew at both Conard and Hall. I had the opportunity to go see Singin' in the Rain at Conard and Pops and Jazz over the last couple of weeks, and as always was totally blown away by the talent that we have right in our own schools, and judging by the responses of the audience members around me, this is a very commonly held belief that we have very talented students, and it takes a lot of people and a lot of practice and rehearsal to put together these shows. It's not just the people that you see on the stage, it's the people behind the stage doing the lights, the stage manager getting props, the pit crew, it's everybody. And so kudos to everyone who participated, and thank you to all of the teachers and staff who committed their time as well.
So Tom stole my thunder earlier, but maybe someone's tuning in late and they'd only watched, the last few minutes. And so I'm just going to remind everybody out there that Thursday is World Down Syndrome Day, and it's a great thing. And it's a lot of times when you hear these kind of things, you're like, oh, that's something that's been around forever. And, it's just like, maybe you haven't been paying attention to it. It really hasn't. It's a newer thing that's only come around in the last 6, 8, 10 years. And so it's really since it's a newer thing, I think a lot of people aren't really aware of it and what it means. So if you have a moment to take time to take a minute to look up about like what it means and why we celebrate it, I encourage you to do that. And the idea of wearing crazy socks is just a way to bring awareness to it. So if you have something in the drawer that you've always when I wish I had a good reason, Thursday would be a really good time to just give an excuse like, well, it's World Down Syndrome Day, and this is what we do. So just keep that in mind. Thanks.
Just a segue, and I think when George H. Bush died, he wore socks that were made by a Down syndrome gentleman, and has quite a successful business. So that might be a nice organization to support for Crazy Sock Day.
Yeah, there's a lot of successful business people with Downs. The one that Mark mentioned, I've seen about them, and actually, if you literally just Google like successful Down syndrome business people, you'll find there's a lot of them. So they're just like the rest of us folks. They're entrepreneurs. They're business people. They're a variety of things. And again, that's what the whole idea about World Down Syndrome Day is about, and also the video that he mentioned about human needs for special needs. It's worth seeing too, and I could share it with you because I think as much as it's an unintended consequence, the fact that we refer to it as special needs can carry maybe just a certain connotation that has a negative bias, even though I know that's not the intention of it. But that's why this video about human needs is so striking and really impactful, because it really just kind of shed that whole label and make it clear that, well, everybody just has these human needs, regardless of your background, whether you have a disability or not. So I'll share it with you.
Now we move to non-staff communications and reports from our student board representatives.
Hi everyone, things at Hall are in full swing per usual. Winter sports are officially over, and Miller Anderson, Blake Moore, and Muhammad Ali and Trey Cormier recently went to the Indoor Track Nationals 2 weekends ago and placed 5th in the distance medley relay, so a huge congrats to that team and their incredible accomplishment. Spring sports have just begun and we're all excited for the matches to begin. As Ms. Poland said, Pops Jazz had an incredible run. There was guest artists like Javier Colon, who's the winner of The Voice in 2011, who I got to see, and the New York Voices, and a bunch of awesome guest artists combined with our incredibly talented students made it, in my opinion, one of the best shows yet. Hall's annual dodgeball tournament took place last week. That was really fun to watch. I did not participate in that. I was on the sidelines where it was safe. Hall's annual male beauty pageant, Mr. Hall, is taking place tomorrow. It's going to be a really fun event. It's at Hall Auditorium at 7 for $5, and all proceeds will be donated to CCMC. So it's a bunch of senior boys dressing up, answering fun questions, doing talents. So I'll be front row for that. So anyone who wants to see a bunch of boys embarrass himself, come to Hall tomorrow at 7. This Sunday, the U.S. Army Jazz Ambassadors are coming to Hall for a free public concert in the auditorium at 3 p.m. It'll be a great event to honor our veterans, so we encourage everyone to attend. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, hey everyone. So first of all, last week at the state Class L swim championship, Conard swimmers Austin Comrie, Julian Flores, Colby Roy, and Ben Arkey set new school records in the 200 and 400 yard relays. Those records previously stood for 8 years. This was already mentioned. The last week, Conard Drama wrapped up its runnings of Singin' in the Rain, which was a really fantastic musical. We had like sprinklers in the auditorium at one point. I hope you were able to see it. It was really amazing. We had some special visitors to the school last week. Frederick Underwood Conard's granddaughter, great-granddaughter, and great-great-grandchildren who live in Pennsylvania stopped by to check out a piece of their family history, and they made a stop in the school store for some apparel. Also last week, Mr. Moore came in and met with juniors about the college application process, the interview process, and general things like that to discuss, the post-secondary search process. And we were talking about this earlier, students who are interested in things other than a traditional four-year college. And tomorrow is the post-secondary options fair right outside the cafeteria for students that want to explore a community college or joining the military or tech schools. The 2019 Safe Grad fundraising events are underway, and this Sunday, March the 24th, will feature a magician named Matt Roberts. It will be an event for families from 3 to 4:30 in the Conard Auditorium, and tickets are $10. I've heard it's really good. Next Wednesday, the 27th, juniors are going to be taking the in-school SAT, which means it's going to be a full-day Wednesday, which will be kind of painful for the rest of us, but I guess it will be way worse for the juniors now that so I can't complain all that much. And that night on the 27th, the Movements Band concert will be at 7:30 in the auditorium, and then the Orchestra Spring concert will be the next day on Thursday, the 28th at 7:30. And lastly, April 1st will mark the end of the third quarter.
Thank you, Megan and Gus. Yeah.
Megan, I think, and I don't want to just broad brush it though, and miss it. I think our track team also, the 4 qualified as All-American, right? All 4 of them? I think so, Tom. I think they qualified. I know there were some All-Americans from that race, and I don't know how often that happens in West Hartford. So that's something to, but All-American. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Okay, future business. Announcement of future meeting dates. Wednesday, March 27th, 2019 will be our public hearing, 7 p.m., followed by our regular BOE budget workshop, which will be budget workshop number 2 here in Town Hall in this room, Legislative Chamber, room 314. Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019 will be our regular Board of Ed meeting where we will adopt the superintendent's 2018-2019 budget starting at 7 p.m. right here again in the Legislative Chamber, room 314. And Tuesday, April 16th, 2019 will be our regular Board of Ed meeting beginning at 7 p.m. here in the Legislative Chamber. Do we have any request for future agenda items? All right. Doesn't look like, do we have any comments from any visitors that may still be here? No. And We don't have any executive session, so may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second? Favor? Aye. Motion carries and we adjourn.